All right, I'm Brandon Neal. I work for the University of Iowa, and here in the Supercharge or CSS with Sass and Compass section, or presentation. So I've been using Sass and Compass for only about 2 months now, so I just wanted to share with everyone what I've learned in that process. Is there anyone else who has used Sass, Compass? Any other CSS preprocessor? It's like one of them is called Less. Okay. Has anyone seen the DrupalCorn Denver presentation about Sass or Compass? Okay. So good, because I stole a slide from there that I'd like to use. Borrowed. So we're going to talk about Sass here, but the first question is, well, what's a CSS preprocessor? Because that's what we're here for. So preprocessors help you manage your style. You can use you essentially use a syntax that lets you have greater flexibility in how you lay out your style sheets. There are newer features that CSS doesn't include, like you can nest your styles and create variables and things that are called like mixins, and then later process it back into regular good old CSS for use. So it's definitely a tool for you as a designer developer to keep things as clean and organized as possible in your workflow. And as I just mentioned, Sass is one preprocessor, Less is another one, and there's a few more that I know about. So Sass, that's the website for Sass, syntactically awesome style sheets. There are two different syntaxes for Sass. The one on the left, .scss files, you can actually use regular CSS syntax. So to get started, it's super easy. You can just rename your CSS file .scss and get started. From there, you can refactor your code into using some cool things with Sass. The other syntax, .sass, it's actually stripped down. There are no brackets, not parentheses, semicolons, and it's purely indentation based. And so it's a little bit more complex, I would say, to get started with. And I'm going to use the .scss style in this presentation because that's what we use at work, and it feels more familiar with people who are just used to CSS. So Compass, it's a Ruby-based compiler and framework for Sass. There's the website for Compass if you want to look at more information. Compass does like the heavy lifting for you to use your Sass files and compile them into your CSS. And it's something you run locally when doing that. You can run it on the server, but my workflow has been locally. And there's some other cool extensions that Compass includes. Like you can create image sprites, which is really handy, and some other mixins and functions that Compass can provide. So this is the image I wanted to use. And this is from this website. They also used it at DrupalCorn Denver. So did anyone see, Captain America or the Avengers? This is Captain America. Well, first we have Steve Rogers over here on the left as CSS, and which is all well and good. But then using Sass, well, there we've got, he's a little bit more powerful there. It's pretty awesome. And then using Compass, yeah, it's pretty BA. So Sass and Compass together, it's pretty awesome. And we'll see why in a little bit. So I'm going to keep saying Sass, and really I might be referring to Sass and Compass, and like I said earlier, and using .scss. So first, a little bit to install it. So I had to use sudo when I installed this locally, but you've got to have Ruby. So if you're on Windows, you need to install it. There's an installer I don't use Windows, but I've got some coworkers that did it. It was really painless. Mac OS 10, and I don't have Linux on here, but it's going to be very similar. Ruby's already installed. You can just update it with the command at the bottom. And you'll want to get Sass, which is gem install Sass. And finally, Compass, which is gem install Compass. Now, everything I'm going to show here today is going to it's all via the command line. If you prefer a GUI, I haven't tested any of these, but there's a lot of people who like CodeKit. I think it's OS 10 only. The other two options here are on multiple platforms, so you could take a look at those. So a few features. First, are there any questions so far about what we might be taking a look at? Yeah. Sorry. And this will be on the DrupalCorn website too, this presentation. It's called Scout. Yep. No, just via your regular terminal window, you can, once you have Ruby, you can download these Ruby gems. Yep. I'm not so familiar with that part either, so someone who has more information, if they want to chime in, that's fine. So some general features and an overview of what you can do with Sass and Compass. Like I said, I've just been using it for 2 months, and I haven't finished a project yet with it, so it's still relatively new to me, but it's pretty exciting. So you can do nesting, and the green, and what's always going to be on the left is going to be your Sass, and on the right is your compiled CSS. And so you can nest, and I probably didn't do a very good job of showing my tabbing, but oh no, okay. So in your logo ID, you're giving it padding of 10 pixels here, and you're also nesting underneath this logo ID an image with a vertical line at the bottom. And when you compile that, it automatically creates logo ID an image. Are there any questions about this color or how this is going to work? So again, the left is the Sass and what you'd actually be writing in your Sass files, and the right is what gets compiled for you. And in this sort of workflow, you'd only want to be editing your Sass files, because if you edit your CSS files, like I'll show in a bit, you end up rewriting those every time you make a change in your Sass files. So what you'd be writing, again, is on the left, and what's coming out is on the right. Yeah?
So if you look on the server, would you actually see those compiled CSS files, or is the browser open?
Yeah, they would be on the server. Actually, the way, I guess it depends on your workflow, but let's say you were working on a theme, and in your theme, I'll get to this in a minute, you'll have a configuration file that Compass will look for. And in there, you're specifying where to find like the Sass files and where to find the CSS files. And so based on that, they'd have to live in those locations. But that's only when it compiles. It really cares. And in your theme, you'd always want to be referencing your CSS files. Yep. The Sass files are really just for your development and use. No. There are Drupal projects to do that. I've never used them, though. So. You can reference parents. So in my example here, I've got div, and I didn't give it any other style. But and then if you wanted to use its, so inside it we're nesting. So without the parent, it would be div and then class of message, class of messages. But if we want to reference the parent, we use the ampersand, and it creates div.messages. And so it really works well for something like pseudo elements or states like this. And so you can do a and then referencing the parent. And it will reference the entire, let's say that you have nesting of like 3 levels. When you use the ampersand, it will inherit the whole tree. So you can do some pretty complex stuff. So you can create variables in your Sass files that you can reuse throughout that file. And so here I've got three examples. A primary color variable, which I've just set to red, and then secondary color, which I've set to a hex code, and then a margin, which is just set to 10 pixels. And so here in my example, I'm just using 2 of those, but I still have those variables at the top, and I'm creating a border class, which in this instance has a padding of my margin variable divided by 2. It can do simple math, which is really cool. And then also a margin of the same. And then, it's breaking funny because of my layout, and then a border color of what the primary color is equal to. So then on the right we have padding, which is 5, which is again margin divided by 2, and then border color equals red. So these are very simple examples, but you can use this throughout your style. So if you set your primary color variable and you reference it 30 times, instead of using that color value, you just use the variable. And let's say that you want to reuse that theme on a different site and they just want a little bit different color, boom, you just change that one place. You don't have to do search and replace, you can just change that variable. So it's super handy. Are there any questions so far about variables or like nesting?
So can you talk about the scope of those variables?
So they're scoped to, like if you've referenced it in your one sheet, it's available to the whole sheet. And I'll show you, I'm going to show the AdaptiveTheme's implementation of this, but they have like base, like included Sass files where you kind of set all of your global variables you want to use, and then it just gets included at the top of every page. So I don't know if it's like, if you create like I don't know what happens inside of like a mixin.
Sorry, I was jumping forward to runtime.
Oh, okay.
Checking out what you're
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? So there's also something called a mixin. And so you can reuse, like we were just, in our variable example, we were just reusing a piece of a little snippet, a color, a pixel value, that sort of thing. With a mixin, you can reuse whole chunks of your CSS, which is really handy. And so what I'm doing here is I'm defining a mixin, that's what @mixin is, and the mixin is called left, and I'm giving it an argument that's available called dist for distance. And inside that mixin, I have float left and margin left with whatever that distance is. So down below, I'm including my left mixin and giving it 10 pixels. And when that gets compiled, actually I don't have the compiled example, but what it would be is float left, margin left, 10 pixels. Here's another example of a mixin. And so here you've got a button class with a very popular pre-included mixin called border radius. If you're trying to do rounded corners and things, you know that various browsers have various prefixes, and sometimes it's kind of annoying to remember all of them, make sure you have them all right. And so what Compass and Sass let you do is just include this border radius mixin, and the compiled version will have all of those prefixes already in there for you, and you don't have to worry about it. So in this instance, like all of my examples so far have been kind of like it's a larger example in the Sass file, but this is actually less code you're going to write when using just the border radius mixin. And there are a lot of these on the Sass and on the Compass documentation pages. There's a lot of, I mean, that's where all the documentation is, and there's a lot of mixins that you can use. So this is just a really good example because everyone wants to try to do some rounded corners. There's also really nice gradient mixins that come included. And there's also, I've used those, and I've also used, there are some other color mixins. So like you could use like a lighten, or a lighten function, I should say, and you could take a color value, like your variable you set for your primary color, and you could lighten it by 50%, and then it would create whatever that hex value is for you. You don't have to do that yourself. So it's really nice. So are there any questions so far about some of those features of Sass and Compass? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about compiling with Compass, because that's where the magic happens. So earlier we installed Compass, and we've seen examples of how Compass and Sass work. Now I'll kind of go over how your workflow would work to actually utilize this. Compass is going to look for a configuration file, or when you run Compass, you have to give it those parameters. And so what this configuration file does, it can do a lot of things, but generally the most important things are it tells it where the Sass files are, and it also tells it where you want to compile your CSS to, because that's important. Some other configuration settings that it does, you can specify how you want, do you want it, when you compile your CSS, do you want to include comments? Do you want to include certain comments? So maybe just a line comment you'll include, but not block comments. It can strip those things out. Do you want to minify your CSS automatically when it compiles? Or do you want to keep it expanded so it's easy for you to read later? And I'll show some examples of that later. We'll talk about that. There are essentially 3 commands that you need to use when using Compass. And that's one of the reasons I don't use a GUI for this, because it's just 3 commands in the command prompt. So the first command is called Compass clean, and it removes CSS files from that CSS directory. And you just run Compass clean. And so it wipes it out, clean slate. You still have all of your Sass in your Sass files, so it's not like your themes just all of a sudden everything's gone. It's just ready to recompile all of your CSS. And you'd use this when let's say you've been working in development and you're ready to push it to a testing server or to a live server. You'd want to clean those and get rid of them first before you run this next command, which is compile, and it will compile your files into your Sass files into the CSS files. And so it will do a fresh compile that way if you've already cleaned them out, and that's nice just to make sure you have everything in there. Now this is awesome. The third command is called Compass watch, and what it'll do is, let's say you're working on your Sass, and if you run Compass watch before you start editing your file, if you make a change to your Sass file and save it, boom, it'll know, and it'll recompile that one file into CSS. So that way you can refresh your browser and see what happened. There's also some error checking. There's in all of the Compass compiling. So let's say that you forget a bracket, it's going to warn you that there's an error and what line it thinks the error is at. And you don't get that with just regular CSS. And so that's really, really nice. So I'm going to show some of how this works, all of the Compass compiling and the like, and we'll look at a configuration file. And we're going to look at it in the AdaptiveTheme 3X, which just had its first stable release like 2 days ago. We use it at work, and we've liked it. And it's one of the big responsive Drupal 7 base themes that are out there. So if you want to take a look at it, great. Otherwise, you can just start using Sass today in any theme that you use, or in any project really. It doesn't even have to be Drupal. So let me examine. So it's probably hard to read, isn't it? Yeah. Is that any better? These are comments, so we're not really going to look at those. So let me show you. So I have a subtheme here called, here, let me see if I can zoom in. Well, this is a subtheme of AdaptiveTheme, and it's built with a config.rb file, and that's for our Sass integration. This is the CSS folder, and that's where all the compiled CSS goes. And here's my Sass file, and that's where all of my .scss files are located. And so looking at the config.rb file, like I said, there's a lot of documentation in here, but there's also, there's a lot of things you can set. There's an environment variable that you can swap in and out with production here, and that will let you there's some debug information that gets written into your CSS while you're developing, which lets you use are most of you familiar with Firebug? There's a Fire Sass plugin, which if you were previewing, let's say you were previewing your project in Firebug, and you're using Sass, you're not going to want to, you don't really care where the location of your, style is coming from in the CSS, because that's what regular Firebug would show you. You want to know where it is in your Sass file, so it's easier for you to find. And so the Fire Sass plugin or add-on is what lets you do that. But this environment variable takes is part of that. That's what helps set if that's getting written into the file. And that's, I'll show you what that looks like. Okay. That's this string here, this Sass debug info. And really what it's doing is it's telling me where the location is of my SCSS file. And you don't really need that at all when you're done in production. And if you're working like in a team with people, they don't need this either, because more than likely it's going to be a different location for them. Like if you're working locally and you're committing, let's say, to Git, and someone else is pulling down your information, they don't really care about this debug info. So it's a good idea to remove that if you're sharing it with other people. It sets the CSS directory and the Sass directory. Inside the theme, or inside the project, I should say, because all of this will be the same, whether you're using Sass for a Drupal theme or some other project. And then the Sass directory. And then it also gives an images directory, and that's where if you were using the spriting function of Compass, and spriting is a little bit more complicated, and I don't think we'll have really much time for that today. So just take a look at that on Compass, the Compass website if you're interested in that. But it's really, really nice. So these are the basics of the configuration file. And like I said, AdaptiveTheme includes it by default. The other thing it does is, here's where you can set output style, and that's where that environment variable comes into play. Because if we set the environment variable above to development, it's going to keep the CSS expanded. Otherwise, it's going to make it compact. And there's a minified function too, which will minify everything, which could help with front-end improvements. So that's what that looks like. I'm going to run the 3 Compass commands and give you a sense of what it's doing. So right now, here is the theme, and like I said, the CSS file, or the CSS directory, and then the Sass directory. So I'm going to run the first one, which was Compass clean. I'm already CD'd into the theme, the project, and so I'm just going to run Compass clean. And so it's removed. It tells you exactly what it's removed. It's removed all of my CSS files. So if we go back to that window, they're all removed. Like I said, that can appear scary, but we'll get them back. Next, we'll do Compass compile. So it's creating those files. And there they are. And I'm going to run Compass watch, because let's say I want to change one of my styles in my site. So it says Compass is polling for changes. And if I go to my Sass file here, and I believe I had a block class. Let me look for that. So I was playing around with just a few options here in Sass. And right here in line, like I said, there's a base file that you can just put all your variables in, and they'll be available in all of your style sheets in this theme. But I just put one in here to use it. Let's say for my main color, let me show you the site. It looks awesome right now. But let's say I didn't want this to be red/pink, but I wanted it to be blue. So I'm going to change my main color variable to blue. And a little bit about this inner block class, what I'm doing here. I'm using lighten, like I mentioned earlier, which is taking blue and making it lighten by 20%. And then it's also giving a solid border around any block, and then giving it some padding. So once I save this, so right now it doesn't have any information there at the bottom of my window. Once I save this, it says change detected to what file, and then it overwrote my CSS file. So now that's blue. And it's made all of that, those calculations with the lightning and everything. So that file so now there's my new background and all of my border radius information and the like. Well, if I change it back to red, there's the background color there. I change this to red. it saw the change again, and it's changed my background color for me again, and my border color. So that's a small example of how this would work, but yeah, it can be really powerful. Now, in my configuration file, right now in my CSS, I'm printing all that that debug information. Now, if I'm ready for, let's say I'm ready to push this up to a server or push it to GitHub or something, and I want to remove that, I'm going to go into my config file, and here it's just set up where I can just comment out my first development environment variable and put production in and save it, and come back to, and this is where I'd want to do a compass clean and a compass compile. That way it will look at every file and get rid of all of that information. So I'm going to stop compass from using compass watch, and then do my compass clean and compass compile, and then we'll look at that CSS sheet again. So it's removed everything. And first, my style shouldn't have changed. No. And coming back to our CSS file, now we don't have any of that debug information, and it's a lot cleaner for people to look at. So that's the basics of using Compass. Let me go back to my, are there any questions?
How long do you get proficient with this?
I wouldn't say I'm proficient with it yet. I mean,
What are its advantages to exist versus recommend?
I think definitely if you're going to be, you know, reusing components of your style over and over, it's a good thing to look at variables and the mixins, and especially when, like, if you know that there's something to do like on every project, or you could create some custom, you know, mixins that you always include that you could always call. That's, I think, powerful. But yeah, I don't know. I think it just depends on the person, and we're just really excited about. I'm excited about the nesting. I think that's pretty cool, as well as just the variables. I haven't really dived into the mixins enough to get it, and the prefixing. One of the things I didn't mention was it's doing prefixing. There's also some variables you can set to help do some browser fixes for even IE6 and IE7. So you can look at that and you can set that. And if you're using certain, you know, Sass functions or mixins, and that's set, it's going to maybe make your life a little bit easier. So I think just for that flexibility and that power, that's where I think the benefit is. But yeah, I haven't finished a project with it. I think I can see how it could be really helpful for me going forward. Any other questions?
Was there any reason that you've selected Sass over less?
For us, it was because we're using this theme for every project on campus. And since the theme has it baked in, we might as well use it instead of less. So that was a big benefit for us. I think, I don't know, this debate is happening all the time about which is better. I have a coworker who isn't here, but he started using less and really likes Sass now, but I don't know why. So if he comes back in, I'll try to connect you and him.
It sounds like you mentioned other modules that people are making for Sass, so maybe.
And there is a less module too that will compile on the server. So I think one of the biggest benefits of Sass over less is having Compass there, as well as being able to import other, like, I don't know what the right word is, but other utilities that you can use, or other there's a grid prototyping framework called Suzy which works with Compass and Sass. I've never used it, but people are saying good things. Or like if people are Zen, like if you use the Zen theme, there's a Zen Grids project, which is essentially I think like a Compass like project that he's written to help you make cool grid structures. So I think that it's maybe more extensible. They do a lot of similar things now. Yeah. I think we've got a few slides left. Yeah, one of the things we're starting to do on our projects, we use GitHub to put our themes up there, our projects. And one of the things we're doing is creating separate configuration files for different environments. So if we're just developing and we want to keep cleaning and compiling, we're going to use maybe and set configuration or config.rb to be set for that that environment. So like having everything expanded, printing the debug information, all of that. And then if we're ready to clean and compile for GitHub and make a commit, we could use this other config_git file, which would just eliminate the debug information, but maybe keep everything compiled. And then once we're ready to release it, we might use this prod one. I mean, the benefit of this over changing some of those values just in your config file is it's just ready for you there, and you can reference it via the command line instead of going into the file, making a change, and saving it. It just depends on your workflow, but we found this to be pretty handy. And so you could specify which configuration file by doing. I'll do a Compass clean first, and then a compile. I don't have any of those extra files in here, but I can just reference the config.rb file. I think. Yeah. So -C will let you reference which configuration or override the default, which will be that. But maybe I did it wrong. Oh, 1 second. Oh, I used the wrong command. So it used that file. But if I had a config_git, you could do the same thing and have it just ready for that environment. And then just some resources. The Denver 2012 Compass Sass presentation is really, really good, and I recommend you guys taking a look at it. The videos on the DrupalCorn website, and as well as the Sass documentation, reference, and Compass. So that's what I've got for a presentation. Are there any other questions or comments? Yeah.
What is the coolest example of this in use?
I don't know. I might have to get back to you on that. Yeah, I mean, we're doing some fun stuff internally with doing, I would say, like the gradient plus spriting system. And so I think just having that availability is cool. Like, it probably wouldn't be a really good example to show, but like being configured, it's pretty awesome. Yeah. Because it also, you can also set, you can do SVG experimental like image gradients, and it will create those for you and put all that code in, plus all of the regular like gradient, like image gradient information, and like, yeah, it does a lot when you run one simple mixin like that. So I'd look at those, definitely.
So have you seen it used in runtime at all?
I haven't, no. It's something we talked about, but the other thing is like, we were doing that with like 1 or 2 sites using less, and the question is, well, why do you want to do it? And if you have a specific reason for that, like maybe somehow like in your theme settings, like in your theme you're configuring a variable which somehow gets back into your Sass file, which will then create you could do that or something, but I don't know. It's something more advanced than I think we've looked at.
Seems there's potential there, but
Yeah.
there could be other ways to do the same thing.
Yeah, like I've heard, I used to use the Omega theme a lot, and I heard that they were looking at the next version, and this was like 4 months ago when they were talking about it, to use like to automatically do some of that compiling to do like different template files and different grid information. Like that would be pretty cool. Any other questions? All right, thanks.